Hello and welcome, everyone. So good to see you on this amazing spring, summer 2023. Spring did not show up, but summer is here in New York City. Wonderful time to start talking about flower waste, leaves, your food waste, any kind of organic waste besides, that you can find in nature that can be used to dye your clothing and dye your fabrics, even paint, as you're going to see here with Cara Piazza, who is one of our fellows at the Slow Factory. Cara has been sort of working behind the scenes in the Slow Factory labs, helping us figure out ways, creative ways to dyeing the leather that we're growing in the lab with natural ingredients, natural materials. And we are also deeply, deeply interested in food waste to dye. Today, the class is going to look at waste to resource, multi-local systems, and scaling them, small versus large. And Cara Piazza is one of our fellow researchers at Slow Factory this semester. We're so excited to have you, Cara. And we are also working on a special collaboration together that is going to be launched during Earth Day, that will allow you all to be able to get a dye kit created and created by Cara, and use it on a Slow Factory swag. But you'll hear more about it later. So first, I would like to thank Flamingo Interpretation. We have today Shahrazad with us, but also we have Gray, who is the founder of Flamingo. And we're so excited to have you both interpret this class. We're very grateful for your support. Thank you so much for being here. And Cara, thank you so much for teaching us today about natural dyes, about working with waste to resource, and about, basically at-home solutions for natural dyeing. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go off camera. One more housekeeping rule. If you are needing to click on the closed captioning or showing captions, they are in your toolbar, either at the bottom or at the top, depending on your settings. And all questions should please go into the Q&A. We will address questions at the end of the class. And please feel free to use the chat to tell us where you're logging in from. If you have tried to dye with natural dyes or natural ingredients, food waste. We're going to see here with Cara that there's a variety of ways to look into this, creative ways to reuse our food waste into something more creative. Thank you so much, Cara.
Thank you, Celine, and thank you so much to the Slow Factory for having me today. I'm really excited to share my practice with you and share some hopefully inspirational ideas and theories around scaling and what that really means for natural dyes and whether we should or we shouldn't do it. And basically my passion, which is turning waste into a resource. So thank you so much for letting me be here today and share that with you. So as Celine said, my name is Cara Piazza. I work in East Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and I run a small scale natural dye studio. So what that means is I do everything from dyeing fabric for interior designers to fashion designers to artists. I've also worked on wood. I teach classes. I pretty much anytime I get to spread the gospel, so to speak, of natural dyes, I love to do it because I really think it's very important to be able to share information just the way that the Slow Factory does, like with OpenEDU, because it helps empower people to make smarter, more sustainable, circular decisions for themselves. So some of the things that I offer are ombre, which means dip dyeing, shibori, which is the Japanese ancient art of tie, well, not tie-dye, it's much more elevated than that, but like folding and resist making, bundle dyeing, eco printing, rust dyeing, hand painting. I also do sustainable consulting as well. So these are all offerings that can happen under the umbrella of natural dyes. Here are some just examples of paperwork that I've created. So sometimes I think when people hear the word natural dyes, they think that you only can dye clothing, but actually anything that's a natural fiber, natural dyes will take to. So you're really your creativity is kind of open to anything that you can imagine. Here are some examples of work in my studio. I also do paintings as well. Natural dyes can also be applied, and extracts can be applied to making paint. So that's also something you can kind of think of in your practice. It's actually the way that we created our paints pre the Industrial Revolution. So all paint came from natural earth pigments prior to 1856. Here's more examples of some watercolor. And then I also wanted to show that I work in wallpaper. So I have had my natural dyes translated into digital prints, and sometimes people say, oh no, like, is that like working in digital isn't natural, you know, but I like to really abide by the rule that like sustainability is something that needs to be kind of like looked at not in a purist mentality. I think that there are options and ways that you can create non-toxic solutions that aren't exclusive or maybe too expensive for the average consumer. So that's also something I hope to kind of talk about today, is that you know, sometimes natural dyes can kind of command a luxury price point, but when you learn how to do it yourself, you can find solutions that actually make it affordable and within most people's budget. Here's work that I did for the designer Mara Hoffman. This is an example of bundle dyeing. We did it with safflower and actually waste roses. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go on, but these are just some examples of the different techniques. This is an example of solid dyeing that I did for the brand Samuel Snyder. So you can see you can get some pretty rich, dark, black colors with natural dyes, which is a really hard color to achieve, but when you get there, it's very satisfying. Digital prints on the left-hand side for the company Jason Wu, and then this is an example on the right of ombre or dip dye. And here is messy stained hand fingers that I had taken by the photographer Andrea Gentle. So I get asked this a lot. Why natural dyes? The synthetic dye industry is one of the top leaders in polluting our world's water. Standard dyes use heavy metals to fix the color of the cloth, and they're not biodegradable and can take more than 300 years to fully disintegrate, destroying the ecosystems and the drinking water where the synthetic dye houses are located. So, you know, there have been these reports of people's water turning blue. I think it happened by the M&M factory, actually, the bees turning the honey in the neighborhood, different colors. And like, that's not what we want. We want to remember that we're all part of an ecosystem. So when you're working with natural dyes and you properly dispose of your wastewater, it's totally fine for it to go back into the environment. Natural dyes derived from plants, food waste byproducts, and animal-based dyes are a sustainable and holistic way to color your cloth. That is something that I want to say, is that some natural dyes do actually come from insects. So if you are vegan or you don't work with animals, you'd want to avoid those. But there's a bug called the cochineal beetle or the lac beetle, which actually comes from a bug. So that is something to be mindful of. But they're slow, they're considered and conscious. Natural dyes create a story, they imbue history, and I think they transcend homogenous industry norms, bringing life to all fabric applications while not polluting our planet. This is why I love them. Oh, sorry, I went too far. So one thing that I love about natural dyes is they have a terroir like wine. So you know how wine from different regions tastes different? Natural dyes actually follow the same principles. Color grown all over the world possesses different characteristics that cause subtle nuance in the shades that they produce. So what that means is, let's say you have a dye stuff called madder root. If you grow it in your backyard in Greenpoint, as opposed to someone who grows it in Turkey, the color is going to be a little bit different. Oh, I went backwards, sorry. Many variables go into the extraction of a shade of the color, which can kind of be a little bit frustrating for the beginner because so many different things kind of contribute to the color that you're getting. So what that means, for example, is the temperature of the water, the time that it took to cook the dye, the health of the soil where you harvested the dye, the pH of the water that you're using, the metal of the pot you're using, your mood that day, the moon, all these things you have to kind of track to be able to get your color. But I actually think that that is something you can use to your advantage later. How can we harness what is different to our advantage? So I actually believe that when we kind of embrace these subtle nuances and we embrace these variables, we can actually start creating a story that really highlights our differences and really highlights the beauty and the fact that we're unique. Working with the specific characteristics of the local industries, our tastes, and our cultures can all lead to exciting campaigns and projects. I like to tell this story, the little anecdote. I'm sorry if anyone's heard this before that has been to one of my lectures, but I had a client who I was white label or private dyeing for. I dyed a series of scarves for, and they didn't tell their store that the scarves were naturally dyed. And the store was like, these are defunct, like they're terrible. I want to return them. And the client obviously came back to me and were really upset. And they were like, whatever. And I said, well, did you tell them the story of what they were dyed with and like who dyed them and how they were dyed? And they were like, oh no. And I was like, go back to them, tell them the ingredients, tell them they were dyed by a baby witch in Brooklyn. You do the thing. The store ordered 10 more. Nothing changed in the product. It was the story. The storytelling really has a capacity to inspire and impact like conscious consumer choices. So I really think that it's really important that we kind of interact with our products in a way that is sustainable and holistic, because by really curating and crafting truthfully the story that took to make them. So one of my favorite design heroes is an Italian theorist named Ezio Manzini. And he, inspired by Wolfgang Sachs, who's another design theorist, really worked on creating the theory of cosmopolitan localism. So thinking about ways that we can integrate traditional craftsmanship and the local into technology. So really creating a hybrid, right? Like we want to avoid purist mentalities around unattainable utopian goals of creation, right? So it's like, how do we work on the small scale? And then how do we use the technologies that we do have to our advantage to kind of create these hybrid systems, micro factories, network that really help create change? Cosmopolitan localism by Wolfgang Sachs. So what that means exactly is creating networks that kind of have frameworks that are applicable on the macro to the micro scale. So for example, if I teach you the basic rules of natural dyeing, right? Like how to mordant, which means pre-treat your fiber, how to scour, how to prep it, basically all the things you need to do to make your fabric all juicy and ready to dye, you can then go work with your waste in your local communities to make a beautiful dye result. You don't have to work with the stuff that's in my community. You have the framework, but then you can scale it. So how do we like create these networks and these systems of like interchangeable, interconnected, not interchangeable. Well, they are interchangeable, but interconnected resources to be able to help you empower yourself to make sustainable, holistic, natural dye choices. So that's what I just said. Sorry, this is the slide I was meant to say it on. Again, thinking about how variation is beautiful. Like we are all different. How do we work with that to our advantage? How do we accept and tolerate the fact that all of these variations actually can be used to our advantage, right? I also love this quote. After all, it is only from places that variety crops up, because it is in places that people weave the present in their particular thread of history. I love that, like, most holistic like academia kind of like uses puns around like weaving and thread and fabric, and like it just gets me excited. So one idea is that I like to work with and like think about is converting synthetic dye houses and retrofitting them to be able to work with natural dyes. So what that means is it's very expensive to start a dye house. A dye house has machines that are like 700 feet long and big and scale is crazy, but can we work with the systems that are already in place to teach them how to use natural extracts, wastes, dyes, to be able to just take the little bit that we can and make it natural? So here's an example of me naturally dyeing within a synthetic dye house here in Long Island City. So you can just see a little example. Sorry for the little Instagram logo. This is something called a paddle machine. This is the mordant or the tannin that we're using to, I strain it so it doesn't get clumpy. And then the paddles turn the dye. This machine is actually very large. It holds about 200 pounds. This is something called madder extract. So you see it's going quite pink. And the paddle basically turns and gets the fabric rotating so that the dye is even. And then this was a dye bath that I did for the brand V-Sides. And it was all done with madder. We called the color zinnia. So you can see, like, it's not glamorous, right? There's Erin, my amazing assistant. And then here are all the pieces finished. And we did about 150 of them. Now, to me, 150, it's a lot. But to another company, that's nothing. That's a marketing campaign, right? So when we think about scaling, what does that actually mean? Now, I really need to kind of, and I'll get to this a little bit later in the presentation, but we don't want to scale natural dyes to a fast fashion scale, for lack of a better term. That would cause an entire dye stuff to go extinct, right? So that in itself is like putting a Band-Aid on a systemic issue that's actually a dam. Like it's gonna flood. It's a terrible idea, right? So it's like thinking about ways that we can do these mini local batches and drops, which I'm going to go into in a minute, but you do not want to scale to the level. I'm going to say it, to an H&M, to a Zara, to a Shein, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a terrible idea. You would literally wipe out an entire species of dye stuff. So it's important to remember we don't need to be producing at that scale, right? So I just have to say that we don't scale. I don't want to scale. I don't think that that's healthy. I think like 1,000-piece job at a time, perfect, which is still a lot. But to a company that is at a fast fashion label, it's just going to be producing waste, and it's just kind of fitting a holistic solution into a broken system. So some other ideas for change are something called community dye baths. There were, and I'll keep moving into some examples of that. But what that, in ancient times, different cultures from across the world would actually have dye pits in their local communities where you could bring old garments and refresh them. So things like this, but here's something that's really crazy when you think about this, just to think about scale, is that Nike sells 25 pairs of shoes a second. That's insane. I don't dye 25 garments in a day. I did maximum 50, right? So it's like when you're thinking about that a second and just the sheer volume of what that actually looks like, we don't want to scale natural dyes in that way. That's not the solution. We want to create these mini systems that are resilient instead of creating one big large system that's susceptible to really honestly like diversity is healthy, right? So it's like we don't really want to apply the same scaling principles to natural dyes. So one idea that, I like to put into the universe is thinking about how we can kind of take these fun, exclusive ideas like drops from like Supreme or Palace, like these skateboarding companies where they just release small limited editions of clothing, right? That people love, they're exclusive, they sell out with natural dyes. So something in the like sustainable fashion world is something called a fiber shed, which means that all of the fabric is grown from locally grown sheep within one watershed. And what a watershed is where a certain area gets all of their water from. So it's really being really local. So can we kind of apply these principles with fun marketing campaigns to get people to really understand that you can have these beautiful, exclusive, holistic, sustainable collections? I said connections, but I feel like that was a Freudian slip. Within watersheds, within fiber sheds, like are these things that we can do? And I hope that any natural dyers in here or makers or designers kind of take these ideas and go do them in their community. These are just some examples. The photograph on the right is an example of a community dye day that I hosted. I just gave people quick little demos and they went and they made beautiful work. Like I was getting people asking me when I posted this photo on Instagram if they could buy it. And I was like, these are my students' work. Like, no, I think you have to reach out to them specifically, right? So it was like, just with this little wonderful half-hour demo, people were making these small little capsule collections that were like amazing and that they just were able to do on their own, right? So some ideas for community dyeing projects are repurposing and upcycling clothing, using dyes from your local businesses. Something I really love to talk about is working with weeds or invasive plants. I think that we often kind of have a terrible idea of like what weeds are, but the truth is a lot of them are very medicinal and actually create amazing dye plants. So how can we supplement our dye baths with things that are abundant and growing naturally? Obviously we want to be very mindful of the way that we forage, right? You only take what you need, but for something that is considered invasive, like a Japanese knotweed or goldenrod or something that, maybe mugwort, for example, how can we use those plants as well to supplement working with natural dyes, like natural dyes from the company Botanical Colors, to be able to create these beautiful, small, and local sustainable collections? So this is an example of the Kano dye pits in Nigeria. They are 500-year-old vats of indigo. Look how beautiful they are. Sadly, the synthetic dye industry made them defunct, but are there ways that we can kind of apply these community baths into making them public works and common spaces? Maybe New York City is not going to let us put an indigo pit in someone's backyard, but we can bring our own vats with us and really get everyone engaged. As the sun's coming out, we can go to the park, get people talking around how we can create these beautiful experiences together of natural dyeing. So another one of Ezio Manzini's acronyms that I love is small, open, local, and connected. So basically keeping these small and local physical ideas, but being open and connected with like the, we can use the internet. That's the beauty of the internet. The internet kind of brings some crazy things, but it also is the beauty is we can connect in this way. Like I'm able to talk to you all now over the internet. So how do we use these technologies to interconnect the small and the local with the greater world, micro to macro? Workshops. So these are both examples of in-person and online classes that I've taught, getting people excited about natural dyes, like I was saying before. This is an example of a workshop that I hosted on Zoom from my house in the middle of COVID. The Bible, Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher. Wisdom demands a new orientation of science and technology toward the organic, gentle, elegant, and beautiful. So it's really about creating ways that we enhance and we uplift beauty, right? Like I think something that happens sometimes in the sustainable community, is that we forget that if you don't make something that's beautiful and captivating, you're still just adding product onto the planet that's not going to get used. So it's like, how do we take these ideas and really make a hybrid of something that feels really holistic? So these are some examples of circular and vertically integrated businesses that work with natural dyes and work with compost and the waste. This is where we get to the fun part. The waste is a resource. So circular businesses are businesses that consider the afterlife of your product. You can also build a service into your business. So maybe you're a budding natural dyer. Do you need to be making product, or can you actually be dyeing other people's fabrics for them, which is inherently sustainable and holistic in itself? It's all about working with sustainable and renewable packaging and your marketing materials. All aspects of your production are considered. So like seed paper tags, can your tags be plantable? Can you put them in the earth? Can you cause them to grow? Ways that we can kind of work on products that don't actually take from the planet, but they give back. And then, like we said, creating businesses that use waste as a resource. So the photograph on the right is a massive pot of avocado peels and pits that I actually got from my local Mexican restaurant near my studio. And at first, when I told them what I was doing, they were like, "Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Like, oh, what?" And then I brought them something that I had dyed with avocado pits to explain it, and they thought it was amazing. So what I did was I just provided a bucket, and they just put the pits and peels in. And then I got them, I cleaned them. It's a little bit of a sticky, messy business, and I had this beautiful resource. So when you kind of work with your, I think sometimes, especially in New York City, we forget to talk to our neighbors. We forget that they're people too. We forget that when you're having, financial exchanges, that there's like a person on the other side of the cashier, right? Like, it's like, how do we make and foster and forage these relationships with our businesses, right? Those are humans. So it's like, when they get to be a part of it too, it's exciting because, well, they care about their garbage. Some people are weird about their garbage in New York, but most people aren't, if you can just get over that hump of having that weird little first initial awkward conversation. So here's the example of the avocado peels. This is an example of a t-shirt that is dyed with onion skins. So that's something that we all have that's pretty ubiquitous at home. Grocery stores will, if you ask them politely, let you scrape and forage and get them from the bottom of where they hold the onions. I worked with the restaurant called, oh my God, my brain is turning off. She's amazing. Her name is Nama. She's in Williamsburg. I'm going to get that for you for the recording later. Lighthouse BK. They would give me bags of their onion skins and their avocado pits and peels. And, I worked at the White Hotel taking their buckets. It's, it's a little, I'm not going to lie, it's a little stinky sometimes. But these are all ideas and jobs. This could create jobs for people if there was a demand, right? So it's important to think that, one of the things about New York is we have so much food waste. It is not good. So how can you, as like a single person, help that? A, you can compost, but B, you can start talking to your local businesses about diverting some of that waste and making art with it, which actually, to me, is super exciting. There is a Chipotle collection. Greenhouse, Green Matters Natural Dye Studio actually dyed Chipotle's merch with their avocado pits, which is incredible, right? So it's like, how can we all take this idea and apply it across the board? So like I was saying before, working with this beautiful street salad, I like to call it on the left, which is their invasive plants, but also all work is natural dyes. And then what's beautiful is on the right, it looks like I have all of this amazing, gorgeous, expensive flowers. I did not spend a dime on those. Those are all from the company Garbage Goddess, which I'm about to talk about in a second. But like, can you go talk to a flower shop? They have to, New York City florists have to throw their flowers away when they start getting a little bit like, right? So that to me is gold. It is beautiful. I'm like, I'm going to go take that. Some people, again, a little weird when you ask them for their trash, but if you explain to them what you're doing with it, you show them a process shot, they're usually so excited because it also helps them too. So Garbage Goddess is an incredible company that composts New York City and tri-state area events. So flower events. So this means weddings, fashion shows, big Met Gala things. But what they do before they take it to the compost is they call people like me, and then I get to turn it into beautiful dye. So this is their happy team. Look at all that. Look at that. That's crazy. That is a lot of flower trash, right? We do not want to put that into landfill. And on the right, this is an image of me dyeing their uniforms with the flowers that they took from the jobs. And here is a pile of me sitting in 3 garbage bags full of roses that I diverted from them. So just so you know, it's fun, And then the joy of tearing these apart and dehydrating, it's like I'm not an herbalist. I'm going to put it out there for the world. But like there are medicinal properties for working with plants or healing, at least like from a woo spiritual lens on my own part, is that I just feel very meditative and soothed and joyful when I'm working with them because it really forces me to slow down, right? So it's like to break all of these apart and to hydrate them took me 2 days, but it was 2 days of joy, just like pure heaven. So another vertical integration sometimes gets a little bit of flack, but it's important to think about. It is an option, right? So a vertically integrated company is a company that produces and manufactures all of their own goods. They control their own production. So what this does is it helps minimize carbon footprints in shipping and traveling. So this is a case study of the company Older Brother, who naturally dyes all of their own clothes in-house, but I think that they do it in a very, for lack of a better word, hip way. They do a lot of like cool, like workwear clothes you can work in, which I think is really nice. And here's just an example of some of their garments. So you can see like, these are kind of expensive clothes, right? Like Natural Dyes can kind of command a higher price point because of the way that they, how expensive they are to produce. That is something that I do want to just talk about, because sometimes I'll get questions being like, well, how is it sustainable if it's going to cost $300 to $900? And this is the tough thing with fast fashion, right? If everyone is ethically paid along the production line, that's unfortunately like what the garment costs at the end, right? So that's why I love teaching, because it's like, if you can take this knowledge and upcycle something that you own yourself, or upcycle that your friend owns, or upcycle something in your community, you've just made yourself a luxury garment. And when you get into natural dyes, because I'm sure you're all going to become addicted to it like I am now, you understand the time and the labor and the effort that it takes to make something that really is sustainable. But the hope is that you would keep it forever, right? Like when you've worked that hard on creating something, it's not going to be something that you throw away. It's going to be something that you would hopefully want to be an heirloom, that you pass down, that you really consider and kind of keep within the key that you keep and has longevity, right? So it's like, the beauty of that is that like, even when it starts to fade, like we do, we get old, whatever, you can always re-dye it. So it becomes a story that kind of lives along with you. And I think with that, I am going to end my lecture. So thank you all so much. And I'm really excited to hear your thoughts and take your questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So inspiring. There was so much going on in the chat. I would love for you to take the time to read Aja Barber, Renee, a lot of really great conversations talking about Mia, talking about, the importance of what you're just presenting as creative new jobs, if you will, in the fashion industry that we don't necessarily invest in at all. I mean, we're not talking about scale necessarily, but even if it is for smaller collections, to really dedicate waste to resource at scale means decentralizing it, creating new jobs, training new people. How do you feel about that, Cara? Like in your work, you are so overwhelmed with demands. I know, because I'm one of your collaborators, and I know how time demanding it is to create all this. Like it's a long process. It's literally slow fashion. How do you see it, like being integrated into the fashion industry, decentralized, so you potentially train other people? So let's say the fashion industry opened up a whole new job for this.
I mean, that's the dream, right? I think that I'm like, sorry, I was just looking through everything in the chat, and Aja Barber, I'm a big fan, so I just have to say that out loud. But there's I think I've been doing this for about 12 years, right? So I'm feeling a little bit, I'm pooped. I'm going to be totally honest with you. Full transparency, I am so physically tired. Which is why I want to spread the knowledge, right? I think we do have to decentralize. It actually builds a resilient task force, right? But there's really only, I would say, doing production, naturally dyed production in the US, there's 3 of us. So it's me, Green Matters Natural Dye Company, we're both on the East Coast, and Botanical Colors, which is on the West Coast. And then everyone else is kind of doing it in these little pockets. And I think that it's hard, right? Because, I'm limited to myself, and I worked with one other person, but like, that's why I want to help kind of spread the idea and the framework to other dye houses so they can implement this within their own, like there are so many actual dye houses, right? Like the synthetic dye houses all over the country. So it's like, if they don't know that there's a demand for that, it has to come from the consumer too. Like the consumer needs to be like, we want natural dyes. So I think that we have to kind of like help them also understand that we got to talk about money. I think everyone forgets you got to talk about money, that there's actually money for them in it, right? Otherwise it doesn't work. So, have I been doing this like on a martyr scale for the last 12 years? Oh yeah. Like I am burnt out. I'm actually going to be transferring all of my production to Botanical Colors because it's crazy for me to be doing it as a tiny 5'2" human by myself. That's nuts. So it's like we're partnering now, but it's like, but I can, we recipe develop together, we work on ideas. So it's like, how do better, it's better together, but it's also better separate. Am I making sense?
Yes,
I feel
no, I understand. And look, like any type of work that it's in the space, sadly, the public expects us to work on a starvation salary where
yes.
we're not expected to be paid to do these things because we love it. Because you love it, you're not expected to be paid for it. And it's kind of abusive. It's an abusive relationship to creativity and to creative solutions. And honestly, we can refuse that paradigm. We can say, no, we don't accept this paradigm. And we do deserve to live a comfortable life so that we have the space to think about ideas, right? Like, you can't be creative if you're like pressed like a lemon every single day without resources, without funding, without anything. And then the whole weight of the world relies on your shoulders. Like definitely not at all the goal.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important because I think, and I feel like you've also experienced this, but if you work or you want to be working in the field of sustainability or like working towards some sort of common goal for like the collective liberation of everyone, you are expected to do it for free, which is insane. That's insane. You would never go to a doctor and actually, you'd hope you go to a doctor for free. Never mind, just kidding. But I'm just saying, sorry, that was.
Or going to a restaurant and be like, can I eat? And thank you. I mean, it should be free as well, like all of these things that you're mentioning. But sadly, we live within a capitalistic system where, your time, like we say, time is money, right? Like everybody says the sentence. What that means is basically like, in order for you to get funds, you have to sell your time, your expertise, your hours of your days are put towards, exchanging that time for money, which is, whatever, it has its issues, it's a problem. But, at the end of the day, these systems that you're presenting, this is valuable data, information, knowledge that the fashion industry should be like jumping on, supporting, and elevating you from a place of an artisan for being an artisan for an artisan's sake, and towards an educator, sort of a workforce development partner, because this is in and of itself, has the opportunity to be a workforce development for the fashion industry. And it's a way for them to significantly scale down, right? Like we're not suggesting that let's use that dyeing method on overproduction. No, it goes hand in hand with degrowth. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. Thank you. I like degrowth. I thank you for bringing this up because it is so important to talk about how that can actually be sustainable, but then like nourishing, like it can actually be these job developments, right? So it's like, okay, in my head, let's talk about that utopian dream and the framework, right? Like, can we find spaces to turn these waste flowers into extracts, into dye, into dye kits, into like education systems? Who in the audience has the money that wants to give us for that? Let's be honest, right? Like, it's like, these are jobs. It takes literally, like I said, that huge pile of me breaking apart the roses, right? That was only like, I would say like 5 or 6 garbage bags full of roses, right? Could you imagine this beautiful workshop where there's like 20 people together just tearing apart roses and like packaging them and dehydrate? That's like a different kind of workshop. That's a different kind of factory, right? It's like we can teach people within the dye house framework, right? But not in like the factory framework, right? It's like, how do we turn the factory into like a holistic setting for actually like creating art and beauty and product that goes back into the earth? Like, I think it's doable. I think we just need people to understand that it's doable from a financial perspective as well. And you're actually going to be saving money when you do things like this, because you're not wasting all of these resources on shipping and carbon and whatever. And like, you're actually, educating people, which is to me the goal, right? And it's like, then how do we get gardens involved? How do we how do we feed people this way too? It's like they kind of go hand in hand, like fashion, food, interiors, waste. It's like we're marinating on something here. I think it's all happening, hopefully, in the future.
No, absolutely. And when you say this is a possible dream, we can teach people how to collect the materials, take them apart and so on and so forth. That from an operational point of view, like for me as a systems designer, I'm immediately looking at the operation of it and designing the operation of it so that it's feasible. So there's not one job out of this new system, but there's actually potentially 10 jobs, from the of the waste to the sorting of the waste to the cleaning and preparing the waste to preparing the materials and then dyeing the material at several stages. I mean, that one person could be doing everything, but definitely it's a teamwork, right? How do you, like, for you, you're doing all of this by yourself, like, or with someone else? How would you, like, in the utopic framework, how many people do you imagine takes to create this in a comfortable way?
It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful question. I think that it really depends on how much we would want to be outputting, right? Like, I think, from like the utopic side of things, I think you could probably create about 30 jobs from one, right? So it's like maybe and I think the thing that sometimes we forget about, but like in a truly like collective society, everyone would switch the jobs, right? Like you should actually learn how to do all of them, right? So not one person just book. I mean, maybe certain people have certain skills that lend better to certain areas, but like maybe it's a training situation where like we actually have someone who's front of house and they sell the dye stuffs and they're the teachers and they learn how to teach and they learn how to, spread the gospel of natural dyes. And then, for 3 weeks, you actually like work on the machines. And then for 3 weeks, maybe, I don't know why I said 3 weeks, it just popped into my head, but like, you know what I'm saying? It kind of becomes this circular way of learning the whole process. And then, what happens as you go along is you kind of see where you fit the best, right? But I think if, I was doing, me and Aaron were dyeing maybe like, I would say like about 300 pieces a month together. That's 2 people, but that means I'm also doing my emailing. I'm also doing my marketing. I'm also doing my, I'm burnt out.
I hear you. I am as well. We had a board meeting just before OpenEDU and we were welcoming our new board and, just giving a sort of an overview. And I was sharing how tired I am because I am working so many long hours. We are such a small team, people think Slow Factory is 27 people, 30 people, but we are not. And we've never been that many.
Yeah.
We've always been under 5, maybe 10 at times, maybe sometimes 9, depending on the projects. But the core skeleton team were 5 people, a little bit under sometimes. And, if it wasn't for us being able to have the skills to wear so many hats at the same time, it wouldn't happen. Like one person is equal to like 5 people sometimes. So I get it. I'm also personally drained. I've gone into burnout. End of last year, went to the hospital. Like I didn't know what was going on, but it was a clear burnout. And it's so ironic when we talk about sustainability, that what it takes to sustain these sustainable systems that are inherently sustainable to the planet, but unsustainable within a capitalistic system, it's a toll on us. It's a toll on our bodies, on our mindset, on our mental health. Like, I know you know what I'm talking about, because to do this, you deserve like all the praise, because it's so hard to create something like this and to run it and be successful with it. Congratulations on working with Mara Huffman, you know, on
She's the best.
Brother. That's super cool. I know you're working with other organizations right now, like Version Tomorrow. You guys are launching something very exciting. Alan from Version Tomorrow is our contact as well. You know, we create clothing, you know, just swag for Slow Factory. We have something coming up with you. So I'm really honored that you're taking the time to teach us today, and very excited about the upcoming work that we can do together in training and building this kind of educational relationship between the fashion industry that's talking about sustainability, but we want them to actually do it, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm super honored for being here as well. I've been like, everything that you guys do, I think is incredible. And just having this as such an open resource is so important and so it's like gold. It's true alchemy.
I also feel it's gold. It's funny because what is so precious, folks misunderstand it. For instance, you know, those the food waste is gold, you know, like right? Like, I mean, like people just toss it and they're like, it stinks or whatever. Or for instance, you were saying the other day when we were working on our dye kit together, because we're launching something next week, you guys should pay attention to it when it comes out. But you know, you were sharing with me that there are partners of yours that collect discarded flowers, because the flower industry is so toxic, right? Like, you know, creating these flowers of many different colors that are unnatural sometimes. And it's a whole like industrial, you know, agricultural business, because a lot of these seeds are altered. You know, there's a lot of pesticides involved into the flower industry, things we don't think about, right? We're like, flowers, natural. But can you elaborate a little bit on your partners that you shared with us? I think they're called the Trash Queens. I forgot.
The garbage goddess. The garbage goddess. Yes.
Okay, yes. So tell us a little bit about the garbage goddess, because I think that's like, first of all, what a cool name. And second of all, like definitely the kind of jobs and creative new jobs that could exist in capturing that waste that is gold.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. The Garbage Goddess is run by an incredible woman named Liza Lubell. And, you know, she is also a florist, and she was really disheartened with the way that basically, like, after a massive industry event, which is one day, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, the flowers would just get thrown into landfill. And the flowers like typically get thrown into landfill, you know, are grown with pesticides. Like, so she only worked with organic and pretty much local flower providers in her own business, but really saw this hole essentially like in the market to be able to offer this composting service to florists, other florists, big buildings, industry providers, where they will show up with 24-foot U-Hauls and break down the entire event. And what's amazing is the florists are not afraid to pay for it. They actually really want this as part of their process, because it sucks for them to actually have to throw all of this into garbage as well. So what's exciting is that, yes, it's all going to compost, but what's interesting is, like, you know, I'm only taking a very small fraction of their work sometimes for dye, right? So it's like, can we get some of this waste into schools? Are there other like institutions that could like help like learn from it? Are there other workshop centers, like different like art spaces that can like work with this flower waste to be able to kind of make art materials? You know, there are other, I'm sure there are other uses of flowers as well. Something to be mindful of is they can't be 100% sure that all of the flowers from every event weren't grown with pesticides. I think that that's something that is, you have to be mindful of. But again, with like, in terms of sustainability, it is still better that they're not going to landfill. But luckily within the flower, you know, I'm close with a lot of like florists in New York City. Like, there is a really big shift in working with flowers that are grown in the global South that have to get coated in formaldehyde and like shipped up here, to working only with locally grown flowers. And honestly, like a lot, like I was mentioning before, invasives, branches, offcuts, things that typically might no one might really like think is beautiful, but they take them and they turn them into these gorgeous events. So I try and stick close to that community as well, because I know that it's not also going to harm me while I'm working with it.
Absolutely. In the Q&A, we have two interesting questions. One is,
yes,
just the names of some invasive plants that can be used for dyeing. In just prefacing very quickly, in New York City, there are far more invasive species than there are native plants left, because plants are not innocent. So invasive plants, they leach out some chemistry that kill the native plants. That's why they spread so fast, right? And so even when you rip them out from their roots, it's very, very hard to get rid of an invasive species. And we can plant native seeds within a container so that they are not interacting with the invasive ones. That's something that we could do in order for us to give them a chance to grow, because native plants, they're sensitive to these invasive chemicals and invasive species. Like each plant that is invasive, they basically leach out these natural chemicals that they create to kill the competition, and they are very rough with it, right? So if we can give them a use, that could be very cool. What are some of them that you've noticed that exist in New York, or that you know of outside of New York? It doesn't have to be here only, because we have an international community.
yes, absolutely. The one that I think we always see that commonly gets mixed up with ragweed is goldenrod. So goldenrod is this beautiful yellow plant that shows up around in the Northeast around, I would say, August through October. And what's I find really beautiful about the plant is that it grows on disturbed land. So it likes where people tread. It's a really nice collaboration between human and the plant world, because it grows on edges and borders and peripheries where we've disturbed the land, goldenrod thrives. Mugwort is also bizarrely an invasive, but it's also a very potent herbal medicine. And I once took an herbalism class from the people who run a course called Wild Gather, Lauren Giambroni and Mandana, and it was really beautiful. And then also the urban Kura community as well. And one of the things that I learned in this class that really struck me is that a lot of these plants grow with medicinal properties where people really need them the most. So one of I thought this was kind of fascinating, because mugwort grows it drives farmers crazy. If you know people with local farms, you can actually ask them to harvest it, because you're helping them de-weed their land. One of the properties of mugwort is lucid dreaming. So it's kind of interesting, right? Why does New York City need to kind of tap into their dream world? What is it about that kind of energy that maybe we're being asked to look a little bit deeper into our psyche? Another plant is barberry. It's a little bit it kind of grows like a spiky vine, but it's in the Northeast. It makes a very beautiful oh my God, my brain, yellow. My friend Alex Crowder, who runs a company called Field Studies Flora, actually brought some back for me because she was using it. It's very invasive and it really pisses off a lot of people. So we were kind of trying to think about ways to work with a landscaper's nightmare you can actually use for natural dyes. Trying to think of some other ones that are great. I haven't experimented with Japanese knotweed, but I know that it is actually quite a potent tick tonic, which is interesting because it's rampant all over upstate New York.
We have it in the land here in the Slow Factory little forest cabin. We have a lot of knotweed, and apparently when you brew it as a tea, it has a lot of properties for basically boosting your immune system. It has a lot of positive properties. We are experimenting and trying to grow the leather with that kind of tea.
Oh, cool.
Interesting, because there's so much of it upstate. We don't know yet. I mean, we never tried to you should try to dye with it.
I know. I'm going to come grab some. We'll see what can happen. That's the next step.
Yes, someone is asking about cochineal. It's about, we didn't know that either. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the cochineal beetle grows on the nopal cactus, and it has a carminic acid that makes like a very beautiful pink dye. So it's indigenous actually to the global south through, I would say, like southern, like the southwest all the way through Mexico. There are also some, the Granary Islands in Spain also have cochineal farms. And basically what happens is you grow or harvest the beetle off the nopal cactuses. They are cooked and dehydrated down and then ground into a very beautiful pink dye. But what's amazing, what's kind of wild about the history of cochineal is during the time of imperialism is actually like worth more than gold. People wanted the color so badly that like textiles actually sometimes were more valuable than money. So it kind of has a little bit of a sordid history, but there are a lot of like wonderful artists and artisans who work with it in a very holistic and sustainable. Yeah, Oaxaca, Mexico. Yep, big cochineal production down there as well.
One more housekeeping. If you want to text everyone on the chat, you have to click everyone on your little drop-down menu. I'm noticing, Kim, that you are just texting the hosts and panelists, but just if you wanted to share with everyone, there's a little drop-down menu in the chat. This is such an interesting conversation. One last question. How do you keep inspired when the uphill battle of circular business building wears you down?
That is such a good question. You have to pivot. I think like it really stems back to what we were talking about. And I think you need to kind of, I think one of my greatest strengths and one of my greatest weaknesses is that I'm like a compulsive optimist. I just refuse to be beaten down. I'm like, I just can't handle it. So I feel like to keep inspired, I think it's about kind of, such a good question. Understanding your limits and understanding that like it kind of goes back to the burnout question, right? Like it's like kind of eliminating perfectionism from your diet, if that makes sense. Because I think if you're constantly trying to achieve this like utopian idea of like what we think it is, that kind of has this like you're going to fail. It's just going to happen. And then also kind of understanding that if you trip up and you fail a bunch of doing it, like it's okay. You just got to keep going, right? So it's like nourishing yourself when you need to, taking breaks. I'm like a big walker. I know that sounds kind of like weird in terms of inspiration, but like I actually like find all of my inspiration walking. So it's like when I'm feeling a little bit frazzled, my feet always lead me to like the next idea. So it's like sometimes I end up in a weird bookstore, or I end up in a funny little garden, or I'm like sitting in this like, you know, my feet brought me to the like near I don't want to curse, but I call it shit tits. So with the sewage treatment center in New York City, the big silver boobs has like the most beautiful outdoor nature park around it. Who knew? I just wandered with my dog there one day and I was like,
are you talking about the one in Greenpoint?
Yes.
Oh my God, next to it, there is the shit tits. I love this. Yeah. Next to the shit tits, there is one of our previous board member, Marnie Majorel, who is now on our advisory board, has the Kingsland wildflowers.
Yes, obsessed with them. Obsessed.
Okay, so this was our board member since the beginning of the inception of Slow Factory, one of my first friend in New York City, in fact. Oh, and Marnie Majorel, who is actually coming over tomorrow, started the Green Roof project called Kingsland Wildflowers. And, you know, in the beginning, when I was talking about native seeds, you know, she's the queen of native seeds, and she has tons of flowers that are native indigenous to Manhattan, the area over here that's now called Manhattan, but that can also be used for dyeing, natural dyeing. And I don't know, you guys should connect. I'm happy to make the connection.
Please, yes.
I like the roof and create so many, like they're open for programming. I'm just giving a shout out for Marnie Majorel, who yeah, who's doing amazing work in New York and really advocating for green roofs, the importance of green roofs, and the importance of having them be dedicated only for native seeds and native pollinators.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so happy that you're so connected, because I think is actually where I want to move the natural diet practice. I think that like we had like too many people. The funniest question I get is like, why people don't think I'm from New York City. Like I was actually born in Manhattan, and everyone's like, oh, you're born under like a grassy knoll somewhere, and I'm like, no, I'm a city kid. Like no. And I think that that's the thing, is like too many city people, plant people, are leaving the city, right? Like it's like, how do we actually bring the nature in? Because it's crazy to think cities are going to go away, right? Like I don't want to say the statistic because I don't know it off the top of my head, but I think by like 2050, like the majority of the world's populations will live in urban environments. So it's like, how do we actually like regreen our urban infrastructure to sustain us? And it's possible.
God, we can have a whole class about that. In fact, we should
Let's talk about it.
Because first of all, thank you so much, Everlasting Dawn, for sharing alivestructures.com. If you click on it, you'll see the shit tits from the photo. They are visible. That's why as soon as you said that, I was like, wait, you're talking about Greenpoint. That was my old neighborhood. We spent 10 years there. Slow Factory was like very much into Greenpoint, and that area we that's where I met Marnie, etc. But long story short is that, you know, Marnie, the way that she works is that she works with developers, and she basically convinces them to allow her to plant on their roof. Now, mind you, they don't pay her any money, and she doesn't pay them any money, but the city has thousands of millions of dollars into grants for projects like these. Now, the problem is most developers don't want that on their roofs. They don't want.
Why?
Exactly. And she's like, honestly, when I have conversations with them, because she's very, very passionate and she's not shy, and she's someone who's like, because it takes someone that negotiates out loud with people to do these types of projects. And when she asks them why, they're like always coming up with a random excuse that the roof is going to fall, it's going to leak, this and that, which is all false, because at the end of the day, a green roof is going to have a more sustainable energy within the building. So their energy bills are going to be lower. Can you believe it?
Okay, this is my new mission. Call me Marnie. Let's go. I'm campaigning.
Yes, let's go. I'm
gonna go flirt with these developers. We're gonna see.
Yes, both of you are also born and raised in New York, and you have the same energy that's like, let's go, and you will love each other.
I love that. All hospitals should have green roofs. Yeah, why not? It's crazy to me. Yes. Absolutely. Amen. Absolutely. A goddess.
Every roof needs to be a green roof. Every single roof needs to be a green roof. And we had a class within this cohort from Aditi Desai, who is also a fellow at Slow Factory, and she looked into smart cities. And of course, her take on it, it's not a digital technical city. It's not technology is gonna save the world. It's not like basically the rewilding of urban environments, and the importance of thinking of projects like these. And in fact, these are new jobs. You're talking about new jobs.
New job.
You have to imagine the job, look at the system, and create it literally, and go for it. Like no one told her, hey, you want to do a green roof? No one told her that. In fact, because of her studies in in horticulturism, she's a second generation horticulturist. Her mother is specialized in Pawpaw. P-A-W. It's a native fruit of New York City. It's like a mango, a mix between a mango and a banana, and it's endangered. And it's an indigenous fruit from here that tastes like a tropical.
Really?
Yes, Pawpaw. P-A-W. I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, she's dedicated. Her mother is dedicated in that, and we have them in Detroit. I mean, it's native to the continent for sure, probably, but they grow here. And in fact, in the early 1900s, end of 1800s, New York City was filled with parrots. I don't know if you knew this, but it is an environment that is very rich, that is gone. At Slow Factory, we've done a project back in the day in early 2013 about endangered species and species that have disappeared. And one of them is the I think it's called the Carolina parakeet or something like that, the name of the parrot that existed here. And imagine if we had parrots everywhere, like, wow. So
it would be amazing.
Radically imagine. Sorry, go on, Cara.
No. There's an amazing. I'm reading a new book right now called The Urban Jungle that highlights all of this. So like, I'll pop that into the chat, and I forgot the man who wrote it, so I'm just gonna write Urban Jungle. But it's a good book. It's all about this as well. Oh, I'm on the wrong. It says I'm botanical. I'm on the wrong Zoom. That's okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh, bad.
Botanical.
I logged into my other. I work with Botanical Colors, so I logged into their Zoom by accident.
Good. But thank you so much, Cara, for this. Let's send us your resources. Send us, classes people can take online. Perhaps if there are any. Like, I know a lot of our community is very international, not from New York. But I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for being a fellow this year, for helping us with our own dye kits that are launching next week, and for just, sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you so much for everyone that has joined us. The chat was popping as usual. So much really interesting conversations. The chat will be saved. I'll send it to you, Cara. Oluwakemi, thank you for all of your insights. Kim, Zubin, we've been reading everything. Of course, Aja Barber, who just recently logged off. Renee, thank you so much, Everlasting Dawn, for also being so much on top of it with the references and the links. Mia, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Cara.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was wonderful. I'm super happy to be a part.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Bye, everyone.